I have brought up and introduced chronologies of Greek culture in other videos, and I've used that in certain dialogues as a way to express maybe certain Spenglerian ideas, to make reference to it, to have it to set up context for certain ideas. But in this video, I want to concentrate on what we've learned so far about the chronology of Greek culture. And I want to create a comparison already up front, because I think people who study the classics, who study the ancients, if you're like myself, you were probably first introduced to Rome rather than Greece. And you were introduced to the Carthaginian War, the war between the Greeks and between the Romans and the Carthaginians. Already I'm mixing things up here. But that war between the Carthaginians and the Romans is a war of extermination. It is a war of destiny. It is a war of supremacy. And what follows that war is a kind of consequential, inertial action. What I mean by that is that the conquest of the Mediterranean is not an active driving force. We have to distinguish in physics between an object which is moving because of inertia. You know, if I push an object on the ice and the object slides along, at each moment in that process, we don't say that I'm continuing to exert a force, that there is new energy, a new impulse. We say that the movement, at every instance in that movement, it is not a result of a new force, it is a result of an old force. Culturally, of course, Spengler looks at culture through the lens of biology, but perhaps this is a Neo-Spenglerian or even a Paleo-Spenglerian or Proto-Spenglerian. We're looking at culture through the lens of physics as an analogy, and we're saying that Roman culture, at the point at which it defeated the Carthaginians, this provided an impulse, it provided a driving force, at which point Roman culture expanded and conquered the Mediterranean. Now, during this process, Roman culture was not given anything new. It was not given a new impulse. It was not given a new driving force. It was simply riding along, coasting along, like when you put the car into neutral and you sort of drift along by your inertia without anything new being introduced. Of course, friction and entropy grinds this to a halt. Ultimately, the Roman Empire, well, first the Roman Republic collapses, which is a form of degeneration, and then all of a sudden, Julius Caesar, what collapses the Roman Republic, we have to understand, is Julius Caesar invites foreigners into the Senate, whereas previously, to be a Roman senator, you had to be ethnically Roman. And you couldn't just be anyone, you had to be of ethnic Roman stock, and previously you had to be of an aristocratic ethnic Roman stock. So there was a class system similar to Hinduism in which you had certain people who were born to be at the top of society, and those people were at the top. They were the senators. They comprised the power holders, the stakeholders in the Roman system. Julius Caesar comes and he invites in, he sort of stacks the court as Franklin Roosevelt does in America. He stacks the Senate, in a sense, with all of these foreigners. And this really changes the character of Rome from being an ethnic, Romanly centered empire or republic, and it shifts it into this multi-ethnic, multifarious, multicultural, diverse amalgamation of different cultures. And of course, the Roman Empire has a little bit of a run there. And then finally, this energy that Caesar, it's kind of, again, we can reference all kinds of mechanical tricks, like as if, you're watching a space shuttle erupt. And the space shuttle, first, the booster rockets, they're pushing the shuttle up, and then at some point, there's an ejection. And the main core pushes or ejects those booster rockets off, and it continues on its own. That's kind of how we can think of Julius Caesar when he ejects the concept of Roman ethnic supremacy from the Republic. He creates the empire. He's sort of, in a sense, giving Rome an extra boost, but he's not giving it any new energy. He's simply ejecting a concept of ethnic preservation, a concept of ethnic centrality, which for a time had defined Rome and had provided certain impulses to Rome, but by ejecting that, he sort of brings in this new blood, this new vitality, in the hopes that this is going to keep Rome chugging along. It's not something new in itself, and again, I'm using this term new. It's not something new internally within Rome. It's taking newness from outside Rome, which of course dilutes the cohesion of Roman law, of Roman society, Roman culture, confuses it, takes away its purity, its purpose, its passion, and ultimately sends Rome further and further toward that inevitable decline, that entropy, as you can say, as the object moves along in space or on a plane of ice. Ultimately, friction wins the day. The Roman Empire does collapse, and a whole new stock comes in. The Franks, these Germanic tribes come in, and they take over the Roman system. They have a synthesis, a syncretic system. Ultimately, the Trinitarian Christians win out over the followers of Arius, and they create a new, what we call the Holy Roman Empire of the German nation. They create this Germanic-centered aristocracy of Europe, whether it's the Franks or the Normans, or the German aristocracy, or some of the aristocracy to the east as the Slavic nations start developing for the first time in history. Before, maybe we can say they're descendants of these northern Iranians, the Scythians, but they start to develop in their own way. So before we get too off track, I just want to say that the Trojan War is really the same type of event, the same type of ereignis. It is the same kind of paradigm-shifting event. It is the same kind of impulsive event as the Carthaginian War. These are both events which lead to a runaway expansion, which lead to a continuous movement, a velocity of Roman and Greek culture respectively. It leads to a velocity of movement and a velocity of progress in the arts, in science, in mathematics, and so on. It leads to this sort of thing, but it does so based on the fuel of the cultural vitalism and energy which was expressed and which succeeded and held the day within these respective wars, is how we're thinking about these wars. So in the same way that Rome sort of wins the Carthaginian War and then rides the coattails of that for a few hundred years, reconsolidates itself as an empire to give itself a few extra hundred years, then is ultimately conquered by Germans. Again, the conquest of Romans by Germans takes nearly 500 years. It starts with Julius Caesar, who isn't necessarily inviting Germans into the Senate, but he's inviting in Gauls, he's inviting in Celts, he's inviting in these tribal leaders into the Roman government. Never been done before. And part of the reason why he's killed, people think, oh, Caesar was such a good guy, why did all those traitor senators kill him? Well, maybe if you were a Roman senator, you would understand what Julius Caesar was doing and what he did. And there was a violent reaction to that. So ultimately, we see this progression that's happening over time. With the Greeks, we have to say that the event of the zenith of Greek culture, the event of Greek culture, which is the supreme victory for the Greeks, is the Trojan War. Now, archaeologically, when you look at sites that seem to be close to the area that they described as ancient Troy, it looks like ancient Troy was destroyed in 950 BC. Now, the Greeks themselves, in their histories, their dating, they say the Trojan War happened earlier. They say it happened in the 12th century or the 13th century BC. But we're going to go with the archaeological dating of 950 BC and say this is when the Trojan War actually happened. It may have happened earlier, but it probably didn't happen any later. Now, over the course of the decades and the century following the Trojan War, what seems to have happened is through the oral culture of the Greeks, they developed epic poetry surrounding the events of the Trojan War. They heroized certain people, some of whom might have been legendary. And we're going to talk about a legendary figure in the person of Homer, who could have been a historical man. He might have been an actual person, or he might have been a legendary figure in the same way that Heracles was a legendary figure, or Achilles was a legendary figure. These are people who might be based off a specific person. We have to understand also that in terms of naming, that many people had pseudonyms, and oftentimes people would share the same name. And so there's all these kinds of amalgamations and confusions that become legend, that become myth. So we see this process, it's not a deceptive process. It is not a process of lying or deceiving or trying to sell Achilles action figures or something like that we see today. Modern myths often have a very specific conscious purpose in mind when we make a modern myth, which is advertising. Advertising, the media, Hollywood. When they make a modern myth, oftentimes they have a very clear political or financial incentive in every aspect of the myth. There was not this capitalist-driven myth-making. It was not a deceptive process. There were, of course, inaccuracies, and there were, of course, exaggerations, but these were not introduced by way of some kind of profit motive or some kind of need to deceive or subvert the culture or something like that. It was a kind of runaway schizophrenia, as I believe we've got to really get this guy's name down, and if it's not Julian Joyce, then I'm going to be sad. Is it Julian Jaynes? Bicameral? Julian Jaynes. Okay, well, I corrected myself before looking it up. But there we go. We got to get that down. Julian Jaynes' theory of the bicameral mind is clearly flawed. It is clearly problematic because the idea that there was multiple isolated populations across the planet who suddenly made a psychic shift from a form of mass schizophrenia to a form that we would call consciousness, or the mentally stable person today. The idea that we all made this shift as a planetary species is, of course, ridiculous and has no causal explanation, doesn't make sense at all. But to make that a regional hypothesis and to look at it in terms of a spectrum and degrees of shifting aspects of consciousness is an interesting thesis. So we're going to look at a lot of the legends of Greece and a lot of the mythology of Greece, not as the Greeks were just making things up, but that the Greeks were living in a kind of fever dream. They were living, I think it is Jean Gebser, who talks about a shift in consciousness, that we shift from a magical consciousness to more of a mythological consciousness, and from a mythological to a mental or intellectual consciousness. We're shifting away from symbols and schizophrenia toward rationalism and logic and things of that nature. So we're making these shifts, and as we're making these shifts, there is a shift from oral culture into written culture. This is what we see with Homer, because the oral myth of the Trojan War had to be fully fleshed out and developed before it could ever be written down. Homer, as a mythological or perhaps a historical figure, is the first one to actually write it down. At around the same time, Hesiod, who we have much greater assurance he was a real historical figure, he is writing the Theogony, which is itself a mythological text. So we see here, we're seeing a shift in Greek culture from the events of the Trojan War, which represent the zenith, the apex, the golden age of Greek culture. And then 200 years later, there is a process by which the Greeks begin writing things down. Now, it is not to say that they did not have an alphabet. The Phoenicians had an alphabet. Prior to the Phoenicians, the Proto-Balkan people, prior to the Indo-Europeans, perhaps as early as 10,000 years ago, thousands and thousands of years ago, alphabets have been around. Okay, so even phonetic alphabets have probably been around for a lot longer than people realize. Phonetic alphabets were used. We can see in the example of the Norse. The Norse had a phonetic alphabet called the Futhark. And the Futhark was used, and people were literate, and they knew how to read the Futhark without being a priest or a monk or something like this. People knew how to read the Futhark. But it was not commonly used. It was not used for everyday things. It was not used consistently. It was not used in the sense that, you get up and you write a to-do list, or you write a journal, or it was something that was used rarely for special occasions. It may have been used for certain pacts or certain agreements. We can see the value in certain transactional arenas. Certainly in the Middle East, where there's a lot more trade going on, you see the value of, I'm going to trade you, 20 fish for your barrel of grain or something like that. We can see the value of keeping tabs and keeping track of all kinds of transactions using a writing system. So writing had been around for a long time. So we have to understand that the fact that the Greeks start writing down their myths does not mean they were a illiterate culture previously. This doesn't mean that they just invented the Greek alphabet all of a sudden. But it means that they already had this alphabet, which they might use for ritual, which they might use for trade, which they might use for all kinds of purposes. But their myths, their holy and their sacred myths, were always meant to be oral. In fact, they were meant to be sung along to a rhythm, to like a pentameter or some form of meter, some sort of rhythm. These myths were meant to be oral. And there is something sacred about the word and the fact that you're speaking the words. And there's something sacred in the process of memory and recitation of the myth. And all of this, there's a shift away from, in the same way that the medieval aristocrats, they would get a painting done. They would have a painting done. It would be very expensive. They had to sit there for a long time. Someone paints their visage. Well, over time, with the invention of photography, people start having their photos taken. Now, portraits and paintings don't exit the realm of the aristocracy. In fact, even today, in the current year, rich people still get their paintings taken. Rich people, you can still find these people who they still sit down and they have someone paint their visage. So photography does not eliminate the tradition of painting a portrait. But it starts to chip away at it. And you can see this. You can see that the Greeks were a literate people. They had an alphabet, but they had an oral mythology. Well, there is a shift over the course of 200 years where mythology now becomes written down. And that is important because once mythology is written down, it loses a lot of the charism that an oral culture carries. When someone walks up to you and they start reciting line after line of the Iliad, it's kind of hard to question that. And there is an emotional impact when you're in the presence of someone who has charism, who has spiritual power, and they're speaking it to you. It's hard to deconstruct it because it's an emotional experience. It is a symbolic experience. It is a magical experience. It is not merely okay, well, you're telling me some history. Did this actually happen? And, maybe we're going to change it a little bit in this way. And you can't really be self-reflective and self-critical. You can't be neurotic about it. You sort of have to accept it as it is for what it is. And that the question of irony or the question of comedy, making it into something that's funny or making it into something that is that can be parodied or something like that, making it something that can be questioned, is harder to do when it's an oral culture versus a written culture. So written culture really opens up the door for a criticism and a rewriting and a rethinking and a rationalization of Greek culture. Now that doesn't happen instantaneously. You have to understand this is a very slow process. And who we're about to get into on this channel is Thales of Miletus, or Miletus, wherever the stress mark is there, wherever the long marks are, I'm not sure. But anyway, about 100 years after Hesiod, Thales is born in 624 or 623. All these dates are a little bit sketchy. And Thales introduces the concept of as someone has commented on the channel, a math celeb. He is a math celebrity. He is someone who is a mathematician. He comes up with a mathematical formula or concept, and he sort of stamps his name onto it. And people attribute this formula comes from Thales. This theorem comes from Thales. This is prior to Pythagoras. We, of course, know about the Pythagorean theorem, which is very old. Thales is the first in the world, before the Hindus, before the Mayan calendar, before the Africans, and before anyone else, before the Chinese, or there's no other culture which established here is a man who came up with a mathematical theorem. So this is the introduction of a kind of historical individualism. There's a difference between historical individualism, by the way, and mythic individualism, or heroic individualism, or legendary individualism. Those are very different things. So Thales being a real historical character who really does come up with a new mathematical theorem, this is a shift, again, toward scrutiny, empiricism, logical thinking, not symbolic thinking, not artistic thinking, not the thinking of emotion, but the thinking of clear rationality. So you start seeing the hotness and the passion of Greek culture in the Trojan War. It is starting to cool down, it's starting to codify, it's starting to ossify. Rather than being this dynamic fight scene that's actually happening, it starts to become, first they might have an artistic piece that depicts the Trojan War, and then it becomes a written text that you can read of the Trojan War. And then from that, it's like, well, let's take this a step further. Let's start writing more. Let's start using mathematics and symbolic symbols on a page and analyzing them, breaking down and making discrete units and looking at numbers and integers. So Thales starts to do this. Now, of course, we're going to dive into Thales over a few videos. It's going to take a while to dive into Thales, but we're going to get more into him and understand his place really as the bridge between Hesiod, as the person who is writing down mythology, and Homer as well, writing down mythology, and then Pythagoras, who we've already covered. And we see Pythagoras really as the bridge between a Greek culture of inherited mythology. The Trojan War is just something that happened. And the mythology that comes out of the Trojan War, it might be exaggeration, it might be fever dreams, it might be hallucinatory, whatever, but it is received. It is not made up with a purpose. It is not, there's no one who's sitting around and thinking, well, how can I make this Trojan War advantageous for me politically? It is an artistic endeavor. It is a literary endeavor. It is a poetic endeavor. Whereas by the time you get to Pythagoras, Pythagoras is trying to, and of course Hesiod has his own theogony, his own mythology about cosmogony and the creation of the world. Thales has his own interesting ideas about how to break down the material world into water as the simplest element. But Pythagoras is going beyond that into the realm of metaphysics, and he's no longer talking about the gods, whereas Hesiod certainly is talking about the gods. The Trojan War, clearly the gods are a huge part of the Trojan War and the mythology of the Trojan War. When you get to Thales, Thales starts talking about water. Pythagoras even goes more abstract. He says it's not about water as an element, but it's about these two contrasting ultimate forces, peras as the ordering principle, as the principle of harmony, and iperon as the principle of disharmony, chaos, expansion, the unlimited. So he's really, again, we've seen sort of this chaotic, organic system of the actual Trojan War, which becomes the mythologized Trojan War, which then we get into Hesiod, where he's talking about the origins of the gods. Well, these gods, where did they come from? What is their ultimate origin? And then we get to Thales, who's saying, well, we have a material world, but what is the simplest element in this material world? And then you get to Pythagoras, and he's not even talking necessarily about, he is talking about the material world, but he's not talking about like water, earth, air, fire. That's part of the Pythagorean system. They don't throw away the elements, but they start looking at, okay, what are the two ultimate metaphysical truths in this universe that we can break everything down into material, non-material, whatever, and how does material reality exemplify those eternal truths? And so you get one being representative of harmony, two being representative of division, and then three is accordingly, okay, well then what is three? Three must be the syncretism of one and two. It must be the reharmonization of one and two into three. And what is four? So they go through the integers and they sort of stack up the integers, and they create all this numerological explanations. How does, and then they fit the elements into this. How does each of the elements fit into this numerology? How does society fit into the numerology? How do the 4 seasons fit into our numerological scheme? So you've seen this breakdown from actual people fighting to a mythologized version to a cosmogony, an origin story of the gods, to then an origin story of matter, to then an origin story of numbers. So you see, each level, each step is more and more abstracted. You go from the real event in itself to a mythological version of the event, to then a written version from the oral culture. It is a discussion of where do these gods come from before they're just assumed, and there's no question, really. Of necessarily where they come from. You're in media res. You're in the middle of the thing. You're not concerned with the origin. You're merely concerned with what's going on right here, right now. So there's again this dissection of questioning the understanding, literally what stands under the gods. What is their cause? What is the first cause underneath the gods? Pythagoras, well, we're not even concerned with Thales and his quest to reduce everything to water. Pythagoras is saying, how can we reduce everything to number, which is even more abstracted? And then finally get to Plato, where Plato says, he sort of rejects Pythagoras to the extent that he says, the real world isn't even real. The material world isn't really real. These are all just shadows of the spiritual world, of the, as we call it, the Platonic world of forms, where that is where all the perfect things exist. And as they come into reality, they pass through these imperfections. And so the animals that we see are imperfect shadows of a Platonic form of an animal. And humans, accordingly, we are imperfect shadows of the perfect human, which would exist in this Platonic realm. So Plato de-emphasizes the world of matter, whereas Pythagoras and the Pythagoreans say that the world of matter is representative of, emblematic of number, that we can understand matter through number. Plato says, no, it's not about understanding the world through number. It's not that there is a correspondence between material things and number, but that actually the material world is inferior to the world of forms. He's not focusing so much on numbers as forms in general. So, and maybe we could fit in a discussion of, nominalism, the idea, nominalism versus idealism, the idea that things are radically separated versus things being in kind of organic categories. And there's 2 ways to look at this. In the Trojan War itself, each person, each individual, each collective, there's an infinitude of individuality. There is a soulfulness. There is a radical separation between the events of the Trojan War and any other event. It is special in itself. It is mythologized in itself. It is not something that you could, as I do, the ancient Greeks would not say, oh, well, the Trojan War was just like this other war. No, the Trojan War is special. The Trojan War is holy. The Trojan War is sacred. Sacred means it cannot be mixed with the profane. It is separate. So there is this kind of separation, which then as we get toward Plato, things are reduced and reduced and reduced and reduced until everything is abstracted. Everything is in these very broad categories. And we're talking about numbers as an abstract principle, or we're talking about the spiritual world versus the material world in terms of very abstract terms. And for the Greeks of the Trojan period, that they are looking at the events of the Trojan War as holy events. They're not thinking of them, oh, well, the perfect gods who exist up there, or the perfect world of forms, that there's a perfect Trojan War, and then the actual Trojan War is like less than perfect. No, the Trojan War is what it is. It is holy in itself. It is mythological in itself. There is no perfect Trojan War somewhere up there that was like the better version, and then like we got the B- version, or we got the brand name version, or whatever. We got the knockoff version here in the material world. No, for the Greeks of the Trojan period, the Trojan War in itself was not able to be criticized. It was not able to be analyzed. You couldn't look at it and say, well, Achilles really should have done this. No, each event played out according to really what we might call the law of the fates or of destiny or the expression of free will. It was sort of a perfect story in itself, and it was not able to be criticized. By writing things down, Homer and Hesiod open up the door for this ability for cultural self-criticism, which previously doesn't appear to the Greeks. Thales then gets to the level of material self-criticism. What is material reality? Oh, it's probably just all water or something. The Pythagoras goes further. Oh, well, actually everything is just reflective of numbers. We cannot understand everything through numbers. Now, Pythagoras is still at that point operating within traditions. He's looking toward the Chaldeans, he's looking toward the Hyperboreans, he's looking toward the Egyptians, he's looking toward different cultures and asking them, what are all the commonalities? Well, all of these cultures, because of things like astrology, had some element of numerology, and he said, okay, well, all of the mythology of these different cultures clashes and doesn't agree, and it's very difficult to say that, well, Mercury is really Thor, who is really Hermes. Of course, the Romans later do this, because they're in a different cultural stage than the Greeks are at this point, but that is too difficult for Pythagoras. So instead what Pythagoras does is he says, well, I'm going to ignore all the mythological stuff to an extent. I'm going to focus in on the numerology because that's the common element that all of these cultures have. So again, there's this reductionism that we can talk about. And then we get to Plato where it's a further reductionism where, the entire material world is false, the entire material world is somehow broken or imperfect, which again, as we get further and further into this, we're going to see how this morphs into Christianity, the concept that we're in a fallen state, a fallen world. There is this perfect Garden of Eden, but we've fallen out of that into the real world, so to speak. So this is Plato, and Plato, again, each of these, the jump from Troy to Hesiod and Homer is about 200 years. From Hesiod to Thales is about 100 years. From Thales to Pythagoras is roughly 50 years, but it's from the 7th century to the 6th century, and then from Pythagoras to Plato, it is about we would say 130 years or so, 140 years. So from the 6th century to the 5th century. Then with Aristotle, we're getting to the first scientist, the first naturalist, the first person who is dissecting and who is using empiricism in a rigorous way, and who's thinking about the scientific method in a serious way. So this is really where the materialism kicks into high gear. At around this time in the 4th century, you also have Alexander the Great. And Alexander was counseled by two groups of Greeks as he went along in his conquests. He was counseled both by astrologers, but he was also counseled by atheists. So this is the introduction of the Greek atheists, those who, remember, Pythagoras is not an atheist. He's not against the gods. He thinks of the gods as symbolic. Thales is reported to have made sacrifices to the gods. So while he doesn't focus on the gods, there is still something religious about him. The Trojan War is clearly a religious period. Hesiod and Homer, they're sort of trying to dissect the gods, not opposing them, but dissect them, understand them. Thales is just kind of ignoring them, putting them to the side, saying, oh, I'm not anti-religion, but that's not his main focus. Pythagoras ignores them basically altogether and says, well, the gods are really just reflective, like maybe Zeus is like the number one, and maybe we can match up different gods to different numbers or something like that. By the time you get to Plato, Plato is starting to talk about the myth of the metals. Plato is starting to say, maybe we should make up new myths. Maybe we need a new religion that serves political purposes. So Plato is, in a sense, he is not an atheistic figure necessarily, but you can think of him in the realm of communism, and that Plato is a modernist. Plato is someone who says, you know what, old religions, they're dying out. They're no longer what we need. We need something better. But Plato says we need a new myth, like we need a myth of the metals. Or for the communists would say, religion, no longer fits. We have all this science now. We understand we're past religion. Now we need communism. Communism becomes the new religion. So this is the Platonic realm. You can say, let's make a note here, communism and as secular religions, as religions which begin not in passion or tradition, but are clearly crafted for a political myths for political purposes. Archimedes is a technologist, and I forget, if someone remind me if you remember, there is a difference between science, as in the science of understanding the human condition, understanding psychology. Wissenschaft is the German term. It's literally like knowingness, like Mannschaft refers to a team. Mann is a man, Schaft, so it's like a manship. Like a township. It is a collection of men. So Wissenschaft means a collection of knowledge. So there's a difference between viewing science as a collection of knowledge, just understanding, and science then as a technologist, as a teleological, as a materialist, as a pragmatic thing of tinkering and coming up with new devices and making things easier and winning wars and things like that. And I think we can say that Archimedes is the period of the technologist. So we see the progression of the Greeks are focused on the Trojan War as this pinnacle of Greek culture, an oral culture, a schizophrenic culture, a God-centered culture, a fanatically religious culture. Everyone's hearing the gods. You know, the gods are real. They are real as you or me. You can feel their presence. You can hear their voice. Then at some point, there is a codification period. Now the gods are written about, and you can read about them in the Bible. You can read about them in the Theogony. And you can read about we can read the poem. You don't have to hear it. It's no longer a religious ritual. Then with Thales, we're not talking about the gods so much anymore. We're talking about materialistic things. We're talking about the origins of matter. And maybe we thank the gods and we give sacrifices to the gods. Oh, thank you for helping me understand the nature of things. Thales is still trying to understand the nature of things, not from a technologist standpoint of view, not from the point of making machines and tinkering. He is interested in mathematics. He is interested in solving mathematical problems, but it's still very abstract at this point. Pythagoras has the Pythagorean theorem. A lot of these guys, you have to understand, people like Thales and Pythagoras and Aristotle, this period is reminiscent of the genius. And I'm using that term in the way that Goethe used that term and thought about the genius as a universal genius, people who are good at everything. They're not specialized, and we'll say for Archimedes these are specialized. We'll say that Thales is the first genius. He's the first genius in that he's not just a mythologist, but he's also a mathematician. Pythagoras, he's not just a mathematician, he's also a religious leader. He's also a political leader. He's everything. He's also handsome. He's also a handsome guy. You know, you look at some of these guys like, so this is, from Socrates, we kind of get the stereotype of the ugly professor, the ugly nerd. But prior to Socrates, you look at most biographies, most descriptions of intelligent men, and they're all handsome, especially Pythagoras. Pythagoras is like the pinnacle, where they're like, he was the most handsome man ever born. He was the smartest man ever born. So there's still a synthesis or a harmony between the physical, the outward attributes, and the inward attributes. And of course, there are earlier forms of Greek art and sculpture, but that's just an important thing we should keep in mind there, that Greek sculpture, this really realistic sculpture, it's kind of reminiscent of the Renaissance period in Europe. So again, we'll put down a note, Renaissance, question mark. That Greek sculpture develops after the myths are written down. Okay, so we got from the Trojan War down through Archimedes. Of course, we know what happens next. We know about, I'm going to put in here, Carthage, and we're going to figure out the date. From 264 to 146, this is the period in which Rome is coming into its zenith. And if we had to say here, if we had to say 950 being the zenith of Greece minus 264, then we would give the total length, we would say Greece from zenith to decline and fall, 686 years. Now, if we describe the zenith of Rome as 264 BC, and then we add that to the fall of Rome, say in 500 AD, let's cut that down to 400 AD. If we say that's for Rome, then we get a total length of Rome from its zenith, Rome from zenith to decline, we'll say from 264 BC to 400 AD, that gives us 664 years. So we're dealing with two similar things there. Now, if we take that number 664 and we subtract that from, say, 1945, we get 1281. What is the significance of 1281? Does this mean the Black Plague? Black Plague as zenith of Faustian culture? Question mark. Black Plague as zenith of Faustian culture. So we haven't done this, we haven't gone through all of this with the Faustian culture yet, but we'll have to do that at some point. So interesting stuff, interesting chronologies. Yeah, that's about it. I just wanted to run through that. I know we've done it before, but I wanted to run through it. Socrates being an atheist, contrarian, not necessarily. Socrates is very much, to me, I'm thinking of the guy whose name starts with a V. To know who rules over you, it's not Versailles. To know who rules over you. Why am I getting Nazi? Why is Kevin Alfred Strom? Why is a neo-Nazi the first? Google. I don't want to know. I don't want to know about that. It's kind of weird. So the guy is Voltaire. Oh, this is weird. Oh, you're weird, Google. Why would you even bring that up? Why would you even know something like that? That's weird. Okay, well, anyway, the guy is Voltaire. I would say he's very much like Voltaire or Marquis. I don't know how to write Marquis de Sade. Oh, it's a silent S. Marquis de Sade. Thank you, spell check. Marquis de Sade and Voltaire are similar to me in the fact that they are both critics. They are deconstructors without being very constructive. They're not concerned about constructing the world because they see the world as an ordered place. They look around and they say, you know, the world is really an ordered place, and they're not interested in building a new world or a new foundation for the world because they think it already exists. They think science has already provided a foundation. Let's just build off science and let's cut away and chip away at that which is unnecessary. So this is the idea of Voltaire. This is the idea of the Marquis de Sade. So we'll say perhaps this is the Enlightenment period. Enlightenment period. And then we'll say that coming after that, Plato represents the rise of communism and Nazism. So what does that make Pythagoras? Right before Voltaire, right before the Marquis de Sade, would we say this is the age of exploration? Age of exploration, 1492? Question mark. Would that be a good period to put Pythagoras in? And then Thales, where does Thales fit in with all of this? And Hesiod, where is Hesiod in all of this? So there's a lot of questions here. There's a lot of, I'm thinking maybe Hesiod is Protestantism. Because Hesiod takes an oral culture and he makes it into a written culture. Now, given there is clearly a shift in religion between paganism and Christianity. Christianity is clearly about literacy and books and the text. So clearly there is exegesis as an important foundation of Christianity that you cannot take out of it, right? Unless you're like some extreme Gnostic or whatever. But I'm talking about Catholicism here. Catholicism will say that the Trojan War, we'll say this is maybe 12th century Renaissance. Or maybe we'll say this is the Black Plague. Maybe we'll say this is Black Plague 1350 AD or so. Protestantism, we'll say that comes around. Or let's not even call it Protestantism. Let's call it humanism. Humanism, 1450 AD. Ooh, that's hard because then I'm saying that, oh no, the Renaissance comes at the same time as humanism. So, easy peasy, thank you. Thank you for that, I appreciate. We'll say that's 1500. Then we'll say Thales of Miletus. Ooh, he's 100 years after, so he's the 1600. What are we going to say? We'll say like English Civil War. Or no, let's not even say English Civil War. Let's say Henry the Eighth, VIII, Henry the Eighth, capitalism. I like that. Okay, then, so what is Pythagoras? Pythagoras is between the Enlightenment period, which is 1750. Oh, Voltaire. When are you alive, Voltaire? Voltaire is born in 1694. So where's my Voltaire at? We're going to say Voltaire, 1694. Oh, so where does that put Pythagoras as a transition between the capitalism, we'll say proto-capitalism, because if you add like a prefix to a word, that makes it cooler. So Henry VIII, proto-capitalism. When is Henry VIII alive? When is he born? Tell me, Wikipedia. Henry VIII is dissolution. What if I turn dissolution? I want the dissolution of the monasteries. That starts in 1536. Dissolution of the monasteries. So we'll put that one down. So that would be 1536. Voltaire is born in 1694. So what is in between 1536 and 1694? We're going to have to say the English Civil War, people. We're going to have to say English Civil War. And we're going to look at the English Civil War through a Marxist analysis. So we're going to say it was class warfare. And we're going to say that the merchant class played a big role in that. So we will say that, okay, so we've got basically the Trojan War is equivalent to Punic Wars, the birth of Christ, and the Black Plague. Those three events, or four events we should say, are all in the same category of a mythic creation moment, a mythogenesis. We'll call this the age of mythogenesis. Can I make this bold? I'm going to do capital letters. Age of mythogenesis. And then we're going to look at Hesiod. Hesiod is the age of codification, where the myths are not questioned or challenged, they're merely written down, but this exposes them to the possibility of dissection and codification. So we're talking about Hesiod. We also have the Council of Nicaea as an age of codification. We have the world of humanism as an age of codification. And for the Romans, so we have to do this This is Punic, we'll say Roman Punic Wars. We'll say Magian, Birth of Christ. We'll say Faustian, Black Plague. Greek, Roman, Magian, Faustian. Then for the age of codification, we have Greek is Hesiod, Christian, well, let's call it Magian to be consistent. Magian is Council of Nicaea. Faustian is the period of humanism. But what for the Greeks? What would be the age of codification for the Greeks? And the Punic Wars are from 642 to 146 or thereabout. So for the Romans, what would be the age of codification? Maybe we'll just put in Caesar as a placeholder. Caesar 0 AD, or what was he, 70 AD or something? I don't remember. Or was he 70 BC? 70 BC to 70 AD. We'll say that's a good time period for the age of codification for the Romans. The consolidation of the republic into an empire. Of republic into empire. That's not perfect. We might have to revise that. Also, Punic Wars as the age of mythogenesis doesn't work. But what about the who are they? Castor and Pollux, or who are they? What about the twin brothers of Rome? Yeah, what about that though? What about that mythogenesis? So I don't know. Maybe for Rome it would be or consolidation into First Republic, which would be like 400 BC or something. So we're going to have to question the Rome example. I don't know about the Romans. So we'll say for 700 BC, we'll say the Greek. We'll say the Korospoi is part of the age of codification. So we're going to throw that next into there with the Greek. And then we'll say for the next age, this is the age of materialism. The age of materialism, which will be for the Greek, it will be Thales. For the Faustian, it will be the dissolution of the monasteries. Who is it going to be for the Romans, though? Roman, we're just going to say some dude in 200 AD for now. That's where we're at. But I think the Roman one is the hardest one for me to crack at this point. I got to reassess. Maybe we're going to have to do a video just dedicated to the Romans where we run through all this again. So we got our, do we have a Magian answer? Do we have a Magian? Who is it for the Magians? The period of, who's it going to be? The age of materialism. Let's just say Charlemagne for no reason at all. Question mark, exclamation point. I don't know why I'm putting Charlemagne in there. I'm just trying to keep things chronological. Then we have the age of, I don't know what this would be the age of. It's clearly an age. The Pythagorean age, which is equivalent in the Faustian system to the English Civil War. But what is it? We know what it is. We know what it is in the Greek. We're going to say for the Roman, we're going to slap a nice 300 AD. Let's call it the age of, I don't want to call it the industrial age, the age of progress. I think we can say that this is when we get the myth of progress. We'll call it the myth of progress. So first we have the mythogenic age, the age of codification, the age of materialism, then the myth of progress, then we have the age of atheism, with Socrates being the Greek example. For the Romans, we'll just slap a nice 400 AD on there, say that that was their age of atheism. For the Faustians, we'll say it was Voltaire and the Marquis de Sade. And for the Magians, oh geez, if it's Charlemagne, I don't know when the Magians had their age of atheism. Maybe it would be like 900 AD or something. We can say that when the Vikings are invading or something like that. Anyway, next we have Plato. We'll say the age of modernism. Modernism / mythic consciousness / Machiavellianism, something like that. So this is, people are atheists, but they want to make up new secular religions. Let's call it secular religiousness, or something like that. I don't know. That's what I'm seeing. That's how I'm seeing Plato. And then we're looking at Aristotle, the age of science. So for the Greek example, this would be Aristotle. For the Roman example, I've failed you. It's obviously not 500 AD, but we're going to put in a placeholder. Yeah, we definitely got to fix Rome. I'm sorry, but the Punic Wars, I'm sorry, but that cannot be the mythogenic age for Rome. I know we started the video saying the Trojan War and the Punic Wars are the same thing, but they're not. I apologize. I made an oopsie. So we're going to copy paste. Punic Wars are going to have to be in the age of codification. Caesar is therefore going to be moving into the age of materialism. So we'll say Rome, First Republic, Roman Republic. When is the Roman Republic historically founded? It is traditionally dated to 509 BC. So we'll say that. We'll say the Roman mythogenesis happens in 509 BC. Then we'll say in 264 BC, you have the Punic Wars, the age of codification. The age of materialism happens with Caesar in 700. Let me get my Caesar date correct here. Caesar, Julius Caesar, Kaiser. Isn't that correct, though? Isn't Kaiser the correct pronunciation in Latin, though? So he was he was in office 490 BC. He actually was born 100 BC. I like to use birth dates. I like to say that things actually started when people were born. That's how I like to do things. So we're going to put that in there. For the Romans, so we'll say Roman is Caesar. And then we will do, for the myth of progress, we'll say that'll be 200 AD for the Romans. The age of atheism will be 300 AD. The age of modernism, mythic consciousness, I don't have a good name for this. I will say the age of, maybe we'll call it the age of new religiousness, or we'll say this is the New Age, the New Age movement. That'll be the New Age movement, or intentional religions. Intentional religions. Maybe that'll be the age. The age of intentional religions for the Greeks is with Plato. For the Faustians, This is 1848. For the Romans, this would be 300 AD. No, we already did 300 AD. We'll do 400 AD. I want to do Marcus Aurelius. Marcus Aurelius for the age of intentional Roman religion. But he comes way too early, doesn't he? Ooh, sorry, Marcus. You are way too early. The 5 good emperors. Ooh, he was the last good emperor. Okay, let's see. Roman emperor, last pagan. Let's see, who was the last pagan emperor? Julian the Apostate. So Julian the Apostate tries to bring back paganism. So we will say he was in 331. He promoted Neoplatonic Hellenism. So we'll say maybe Julian the Apostate. So we'll say Julian the Apostate was the age of intentional religion, something like that. We gotta fix our Roman dates. It's really bad. The First Republic is 500 BC. The age of codification. Let's read a little Roman history, shall we? While we're here, why don't we just talk about this stuff, right? Rome was ruled for 244 years by a monarchical system with sovereigns of Latin and Sabine origin, later by Etruscan kings. In 509, Romans expelled the kings to form a republic, with struggles between the aristocrats and small landowners. So the aristocrats representing the oligarchs, the landowners representing the small landowners. Rome led several wars leading up to the Punic War. So what I'm most interested is the Roman Republic. Let's hone in Roman Republic. I want to get some dates. I want some important things that happened in the Roman Republic. So we've got Hannibal. The Gauls sacked the city in 390. So we'll take a look at that perhaps. So we've got the foundation of Rome in 509. Okay, so we'll say, when did the foundation of Rome happen? That's an interesting one. The foundation of Rome, Aeneid, Romulus and Remus, who we were talking about. Other myths, the date. So the Greek historian Timaeus says that Rome was founded in 814 BC. And it looks like there are other people who are calculating it a little bit earlier at 452. 452 is looking like the earliest founding of Rome. So we're going to say 452, Romulus and Remus. We're going to redate some Roman stuff, okay? So it turns out that Rome was not far behind Greece. The founding of Rome, we'll say that is the age of mythogenesis for the Romans. Then the age of codification is the foundation of the First Republic. The age of materialism will be the Punic Wars. And then we will say, which just totally contradicts everything I said earlier, but look, we're trying to shoehorn things. We're trying to fit things in where they don't really belong. So for the Romans, this is not looking spicy. This is not looking good. We have 752, founding of Rome. 200 years later, 509, Roman Republic, age of codification. Then for age, then we're skipping like 300 years. That's no good. I don't like that. We're going to have to take that out. The Battle of Allia, Let's look into the Battle of Allia and see what's happening here. The Roman Republic versus the Gauls. Their belligerent forces. Plutarch was a Greek guy who's cool. We like Plutarch, by the way. He's awesome. I like you, Plutarch. So anyway, we're looking at all these different wars in which Italy was engaged. The Gauls were dumbfounded by their victory, and people were set on fire. There were famines, many different accounts. Celtic expansion. Rome is under attack. Modern evaluations. Okay. So I think this is significant enough. We'll say the Battle of Allia, where the Gauls are sacking Rome. We'll say the Battle of Allia is significant. We're going to put that. Do we really put that in the age of materialism? That doesn't seem fair to me. That just does not seem right and fair. I don't know that I'm really doing good things here with the age of materialism. Also, I don't know that the term age of materialism, maybe we should call it the age of alchemy. Alchemy. The age of alchemy sounds like a better, it sounds less evil than the age of materialism. So we're going to go with the age of alchemy for that one. Okay, all right. Are you ready for this? We had the age of mythogenesis, the founding of Rome. The age of codification, the first republic of Rome. The age of alchemy is the Battle of Allia. For whatever reason, we just chose we're just trying to fit something into the chronology. The myth of progress comes with the Punic Wars. The age of atheism comes with Julius Caesar. When did the Magian civilization have its myth of progress period? I don't know. Was that 800 AD? I don't know what we're going with here. Call that Vikings. Throw the Vikings in there. Intentional religions for the Magians. We'll say that would be 1098 investiture contest for the Magians. For the Romans, it's going to be Julian as emperor. The apostate. The age of science for the Romans is going to be Constantine, all right? Hey, Constantine, tell me all about yourself. We'll see Constantine. We'll just throw a date in here for Constantine. We'll throw in the date that he died. We'll throw in Constantine maybe as the age of science for the Romans. That doesn't really make sense in our chronology. The age of Aristotle. Ooh, this is getting difficult here. Then we have the age of technology. For Greece, that is Archimedes. This is the last period of Greek independence. For the Romans, yeah, we're not doing well with the Romans. We're having a lot of problems with the Romans. Founding of Rome, Roman Republic, Battle of the Allia. Then we skip to the Punic Wars. I'll say maybe myth of progress is like beginning of Punic Wars, and then we'll say end of Punic Wars is the age of atheism for the Romans, and then we'll shift the age of intentional religions to Caesar, which makes sense, by the way, which is not the stupidest thing in the world. And then for the Romans, the age of science can be Julian the Apostate. And then for the age of technology, we can say, I don't know, we can say the last Huns. Let's look up the Huns and see where their last battle was. In the legacy of the Huns. And for, let's see, Pope Leo the Great. He was a Roman aristocrat, which is pretty cool. He met Attila the Hun and persuaded him to turn back from his invasion of Italy. Okay, so Attila, the Battle of Chalon is a pretty interesting one. So we're going to do the Battle of the Catalonian Plains, and we're going to date that as 451. And we will say that would be the last, event of independence for the Romans. We will say 451. We're gonna probably shift. We're gonna probably shift Constantine into the age of science. I think Christianity is equivalent to the role of science for some of these dudes. Some of these Romans, I think Christianity was like science to them in what I'm trying to set up here. So for the Magians, now I've got a problem with the Magians. Where are my Punic? I'm going to just delete the Punic Wars, I guess, or fit them over here. Okay, so we've got the Greeks, the Romans, the Magians, and the Faustians. So we said that the Magians came, the age of mythogenesis. Ooh. I don't know if we can say, when does, I would say the Faustians have to start with the Black Plague. So if the Faustians start with the Black Plague, then the Magians have to end with the Black Plague. So let's just take the Black Plague and minus 700 and see what date that comes up. That comes up with 650. Oh boy. So in that case, we're going to have to say that the Magian culture lasts for a long time. It's a weird culture there. So we're going to say, I don't know, the Magians are, I want to do Constantine for them. I want to say that Magian culture comes into existence with Constantine. But actually, I don't want to do that. I want to do Charlemagne. Do I already have Charlemagne somewhere here? Why is Charlemagne the god the first one who pops up? Why can't I actually find the real Charlemagne? Why is it when I search Charlemagne, you don't tell me about the actual dude? Karl the Great. I guess we have to go Germanic. Oh, I search Karl the Great and Charlotte. You can't even. Oh boy, don't even get me started on this. The cultural appropriation that's going on is obscene. So he was born in 742. So we're going to put Charlemagne, which I reject the name Aging Culture. I think it's a silly, stupid name, but we're going to use it just to be true to Spengler. The Magian culture with Charlemagne. That is the age of mythogenesis. And then at some point, he has some sons, right? He's got sons. Tell me about your sons, dude. Also, tell me about the East-West Schism. I want to know more about that. Ooh, boy. I'm trying to figure out when his sons... He's got some sons. He's got Louis the Pious. And then he has some more sons like Pepin. And then he dies. Louis the German. This is an interesting term. Louis the German might be the first time that anyone is ever called the German. So we'll say Louis the German. He's probably important, right? What date did we establish for Charlemagne? Charlemagne is the mythogenesis. Let's just tentatively put Louis the German in there as the codification period for the Magians. I'm sorry, Council of Nicaea. I wanted to put you in there as something. I wanted to put you in there, but we're going to have to, maybe later, maybe we're going to come up with something later. Some new system. Maybe we'll come up, maybe we'll say the Christian system. Christian would be Christ, and then we'll say Christian Nicaea, and we'll put in those guys there. But anyways, for the Magian, we've got Louis the German, and then we're going to say maybe Vikings. Hello, Vikings is going to be in the age of alchemy for whatever reason. So tell me about the Vikings. Give me a nice Viking date here. I want a good chronology. So the Norman conquest of England, we might say, in 1066. We'll throw that in there. The Norman conquest of, we'll say that is the age of alchemy. And then we have the investiture contest. And I already know what that is, but I just want to get the link. Investiture contest, which we have in 1076 is the beginning of that. So that will be the myth of progress for the Magians. Will be the investiture contest. I don't know if the Norman conquest of England is the best place to put the age of alchemy. But that's where it is for now. We might have to change it. Ooh, I don't know. What about the Crusades, dude? Ooh, the Crusades, though. Oh, damn. I totally forgot about those. We might have to just throw in some Crusade action. The First Crusade, though, 1095. Dude, that might just be perfect for the myth of progress. We're going to have to throw the First Crusade in there. I'm sorry. But we're going to have to throw the First Crusade in there. Okay, so I don't know about the Norman conquest. I don't know about the Norman conquest, though. Give me some of those Vikings back, because I think those are pretty... I don't want to hear about the Minnesota Vikings, dude. Why? Why do you do this to me? Okay, the end of the Viking Age. Tell me about it, dude. Christianity, the Christianization of Scandinavia. Tell me about some of this Christianization, though. I want to know about some of this Christianization. Tell me about some important dates for Christianization that I can slide on in here. Official Christianization, new religions, changes, things are happening. Christian kings, other Christian people. Let's say, what other Christian, I'm struggling here. I'm really struggling. Ah, boy, we've got too much stuff going on. Too many dates around the head. Oh, I just don't like the Norman conquest being so close to the First Crusade, but we're just gonna have to deal with that. How about the 12th century Renaissance, though? Can we get a Renaissance of the 12th century? Can we get some talk about that, though? And think about it a little bit? Ooh, let's get the Ottonian Renaissance in here. Are you going to save me? The Ottonian Renaissance. Let's throw in Otto there. The Ottonian Renaissance. We're going to throw in the Ottonian Renaissance, and we're going to replace the Norman conquest of England. Sorry, Norman conquest. But that's just how it goes. So that will be the Age of Alchemy. The myth of progress will be the First Crusade. The Age of Atheism is going to have to be the Renaissance of the 12th century. And I want to, what's a good date here? Ooh, we got the Hanseatic League. Was there a day that the Hanseatic League started, though? Was there a foundational date that we can look at? Well before the term Hansa first appeared. We'll put the Hanseatic League in there. We're going to throw in the Hanseatic League, perhaps. The Hanseatic League. Ooh, now we're running into issues. Now we're running into problems. I wish I had different colors. Can I have different colors, please? Okay, I don't want plain text mode anymore. Give me some colors. Where are my colors at? I don't want huge. I don't want anything huge. I just want colors. I don't want to change the text color either. I want to change the background color. Oh, sweet. Oh, nice. I'm going to give the Greeks a nice red color so I can distinguish here, because this is getting hard. I'll be honest with you, this is not the easiest thing. The Greeks are going to be in red. Why? Because the Greeks are kind of like old and they're like rusty. So that's why the Greeks are going to be red. So let's just color all the Greeks red and see if what we're doing here makes sense. Then we've gotten to the age of science. I know this is not the best video I've ever made. We started strong. We had good strong energy. But then we kind of slowed down as it became less like, oh, I know what I'm talking about. Let me just explain things to you. And then I was like, ooh, there's interesting things to explore here. Let's dive into it, shall we? So then we've got the Romans starting in 750, then to 509, then we'll say to 390 for whatever reason. I don't know, I just had to pick something. Then we'll say the beginning of the Punic Wars. Excuse me, sir. It's just a long video, I'm just fatigued. And then we've got to the end of the Punic Wars as the Age of Atheism. And then we've got into, and we could come up with specific documents to track all this as well. This will all have to be done. We'll have to expand upon some of this stuff. But then we have the Age of Science. And then we have the final act of technology, the Battle of Catalonian Plains. Not Catalonia, but Catalonian Plains. Okay, so that finishes it out. So we've rounded out our Greece and Rome. Could just read Spengler, honestly. Might take less time to just read Spengler and get it right the first time, right? But that would be too easy. So then we said we're going to have a Christian starting with Christ, going to Nicaea, and then, oh yeah, we're going to make it a nice bright yellow color. That's beautiful. And then what comes next? The Age of Alchemy for the Christian would be like Battle of who was in the Battle of Catalonian Plains we were just talking about? Was it Pope Leo? Yeah, who was that Pope, though? Tell me about that Pope. Yes, it was Pope Leo the First. Okay, so we're going to throw in Pope Leo, and we'll put him in the Christian timeline. Where my Christian timeline at? We'll say Christian Pope Leo 700. But now we actually have to look up the Council of Nicaea. Where is Nicaea? Nicaea. Tell me about that council. I want the first council. I don't want like the later councils. I just want the first one. Okay, so we've got an exact date for the first council of Nicaea. we have a date for the birth of Pope Leo the Great, Pope Leo the First, and he was also pretty great. And then we've got the myth of progress for the Christians. I don't know when that comes. I don't know when the myth of progress for the Christians comes. Maybe we're gonna have to say the age of codification is coming later for the Christians. And then maybe we'll just shift everybody over. So Pope Leo can be the myth of progress. And then the age of atheism for the Christians, well, that's kind of hard if it's a religiously defined thing. I don't know even how you would say that they had an age of atheism. Who would that be? Would that be like Charlemagne? What would that even be? I don't know. Maybe we'd have to say the age of atheism would have to be like Pope Leo. Maybe that would be Attila the Hun, someone like that. And then Christian, who would be the intentional religion? We would say maybe that's Charlemagne. And then the age of science for the Christians. Oh, that's getting a little bit complicated. Let's hold off on the Christian because I don't think it's not a legitimate Spenglerian category, so we're going to just hold off on that and pretend it doesn't exist for the moment. For the Magians, starts with Charlemagne. We're going to give that probably a nice green color. And then the age of codification is Louis the German. The age of alchemy is the Ottonian Renaissance. The myth of progress is the First Crusade. The age of atheism is the Hanseatic League. The intentional religious period probably comes with, who is Jan Hus and the Hussites. When were you born, Jan Hus? He was born in 1369, so we'll say maybe Jan Hus can be the age of intentional religions for the Magians. The age of science. Ooh, yeah, we're gonna have to back some of this. We're gonna have to back some of this up because, or back some of it forward. That's not really a legitimate term, but we'll have to back some of this forward. I'm going to have to move the Hanseatic League from the age of atheism into the age of new religions. And then we're going to have to move Jan Hus into the age of science. So what does this all mean? So when is the age of atheism? It's got to be at some point in investiture contest. We're going to say it's got to be at the end of this. The conflict ended in 1122. So 1122 will be our age of end of controversy. Okay, so we're keeping with the centuries here. We're trying to do it good. What came before the First Crusade? I know there was a little stuff that came before the First Crusade. I know there was a little bit of stuff going on. Ooh, the Reconquista. The Reconquista happened for a while there, though. The Kingdom of Portugal. The King of Portugal, Kingdom of Aragon, Kingdom of Castile, Kingdom of Leon. Castile is pretty important. Let's just take a look at our dates. Which should be first here? Which is important enough? Which is important enough to say that we have something cool going on? Maybe the Kingdom of Aragon? The Kingdom of Aragon, though? It was proclaimed in 1035. So we'll say Kingdom of Aragon can actually be the First Crusade, or like instead of the First Crusade, just to space things out a little bit better. So we'll say they're the Kingdom of Aragon. The is the myth of progress. The age of atheism is the end of the investiture controversy. And then the Hanseatic League is the age of modernism. And the age of science is with Jan Hus. And then what comes after that? The age of technology. We're going to have to say that would be like 1492 Columbus for the Magian culture. We'll say that would be the end of the Magian culture. And when did we say the Faustian culture? Oh, we said it got started with the Black Plague. Ooh, that's kind of disappointing that we said that, because sets us up for some weird overlap between this Magian and this Faustian thing. I don't know about all this. I don't know. This is a little bit weird, the way we've set this up. But that is how we set it up. So let's finish out the Faustian just to round things out. We've got the 1848 age of intentional religiousness, the age of science, Faustians. When is the age of science for the Faustians? I would say this would be the atomic age, 1945 atomic age. Then the age of technology, I would say would be like 1991, or not 1991, how about 1993? Open internet. Yeah, I don't even know. Maybe we could say 2001 is going to be the age of technology. So if we look at the age of technology, oh boy, we're going to have to fix, if we're going to keep this Christian one around, we're going to have to fix this. The age of codification would be 100 AD, Bible is written. Bible, let me just do a quick fact check on the Bible. The Bible, when is the Bible written? Let's look at the textual history. We've got different Bibles, the Tanakh, the development of the Bible, biblical texts, people who are writing the Bible. I don't care, I'm not talking about the Old Testament, I'm talking about not the evangelical, what is it called? Christian Bible. It is the apostles. When did the apostles write the Bible? The book of Enoch, the role of the Old Testament, the New Testament. Why am I forgetting? Oh, the Gospels. Yeah, when were the Gospels actually written down, though? Was written between AD. Okay. So there we go. We'll say that in AD 110, we'll say that's when the gospel is written. So we'll say Christ born, 0 AD. Gospel written, 110 AD. Then what happens next? What's some important stuff that happens in like the 200s or something? Give me some Christian history. Apostle of the Gentiles, Bible, development of Christian canons, synod. Tell me about the synods. We've got some synods here. I want to hear about some 3rd century synods. We've got some synods. Let's talk about an ecumenical council. The Roman Empire. Okay, the Council of Carthage is pretty important. That's in the 3rd century, right? The Synod, it was determined that besides nothing be read in church under the divine. Okay. So we'll say this is an important thing. Okay, so it was a synod of stuff. All right, councils of Carthage. Whoops! I didn't copy correctly. 251, Council of Carthage. This will be the Christian Age of Alchemy. And then we move on to the Myth of Progress, which is going to be the First Council of Nicaea. And then we're going to move into the Age of Atheism, which is going to be Pope Leo I and Attila the Hun. And then intentional religiousness is going to come into play in the 5th century with Arian, the Arian versus Trinitarian, Arianism. There's different councils, Arians, semi-Arians. Visigothic Spain was Arian until 581. So that's interesting. We'll just throw a 581 in there we'll say that's when Arianism sort of petered out for now. We'll say that would be the age of intentional religion. And then the age of science for the Christians is going to be somewhere, we're gonna put a placeholder in there. We're gonna say sometime in the 6th century, 600s, hello? 600s, 7th century. Charlemagne, or we have to look up Karl the Great again. Tell me about Karl. Who came before Karl? He was the son of Pepin the Short. Charles Martel. Ooh, Charles Martel was born, so let's throw Charles Martel in the mix. He can be the age of science. Thank you, Charles Martel. Charles Martel is the age of science. And then the age of technology for the Christians, I would say is going to be, we're going to put that back as Charlemagne, right? We're going to say that Charlemagne ends the, I don't know what you call this era. I don't know what you call this era. We're going to call it like, the Roman Christian era, to distinguish from Roman proper, and to distinguish from the Magian, which we're just going to call it the Germanic, okay? Sorry about that. Sorry, Spangler, we're just going to call it the Germanic era. So, I apologize, but that's what we got to do. So we'll call it the Germanic era. And we've got to recolor code a lot of this. So the Roman Christian era begins its mythogenesis. Christ is born. The age of codification comes when the gospel is written down. The age of alchemy comes with the councils of Carthage. The myth of progress comes with the first council of Nicaea. The age of atheism comes with Attila the Hun. The age of intentional religion comes with the defeat of the Arian controversy, the doctrine of Arius. The age of science comes with Charles Martel, and the age of technology comes with Charlemagne, which ends the Roman Christian era. Let me copy paste that a little bit more because I didn't replace all of those. The Roman Christian era is a distinct era, which is the rise of this. Yeah, it's a Roman Christian culture. It is not a purely Germanic culture. That's what we'll say about the Roman Christian culture. Maybe if we reference like the Celts or something, maybe that would be better. But I say that pretty much Charlemagne put an end to the Roman Christian culture, and he created this Germanic Christian culture, which was distinct from the Roman Christian culture, and it was doing its own thing. So that's the Roman Christian culture. Then we have the Germanic culture. Starts with Charlemagne. The crowning of Charlemagne, pretty important. Then you have the Age of Alchemy with the We have the Age of Codification with Louis the German. You have the creation of 3 different countries: Germany, France, and Burgundy, which later sort of becomes Italy. The Ottonian Renaissance is the Age of Alchemy. The myth of progress comes with the Kingdom of Aragon, which we have to understand. The kings, let's just do a fact check before I even say anything. I'm going to guess you that the kings of Aragon were, we don't want to look at the capitals. We want to look at the kings. Who were the kings? Garcia Sanchez. Okay, that sounds pretty Hispanic. It sounds pretty Hispanic, right? As the eldest son of Sancho the Great. Is Sancho a Hispanic name? His parents were Garcia Sanchez. His mother was an aunt. He joined his cousin. His eldest son. Who is his father, though? His predecessor, Sancho II. Okay, how about Garcia the First? How about Sancho the First? I just have to keep going back. Fortune, Garcia, Inigo Arista was a Basque leader. Oh my goodness. He was a Basque leader? He was not a Germanic leader? Oh, I sound silly now. I sound pretty silly. All right, well, apparently the Basque people are rising up. Oh, that was my mistake. All right, but anyway, we're gonna slide that in there in the myth of progress. Age of atheism is the investiture controversy. The end of the controversy is a kind of atheism, lack of fanaticism. Then you have modernism with the Hanseatic League, a kind of mercantilism. You have the Age of Science with Jan Hus. Maybe not the best term there for Jan Hus. And then the Age of Technology with Columbus. So that ends what we refer to as the Germanic Age, the Age of Germanic Kingship. I would say the mythogenesis of the Faustian era is the Black Plague. Then you have the Age of Codification is in humanism. The Age of Alchemy is in, okay, we're going to take that out. Oh boy. We did some bad things here. We mixed up our Greek with our Faustian, so we're going to have to make a correction there. All right. Thales as the first genius. We might call this the Age of Genius / Alchemy, rather than the Age of Alchemy, because I know alchemy is a specific thing. So the age of alchemy, how does that sound? The age of alchemy is Thales. The age of alchemy is the Battle of Allia. The age of alchemy for the Christians is the Council of Carthage. The age of alchemy for the Germans is the Ottonian Renaissance. The age of alchemy for the Faustians is Henry VIII and his proto-capitalism. Then for the myth of progress, we have Pythagoras. We have the Roman beginning of the Punic Wars. For the Christians, it's the First Council of Nicaea. For the Germans, it's the Kingdom of Aragon, founding of the Kingdom of Aragon. And for the Faustians, it is the English Civil War. The age of atheism is going to be for the Greeks, it's going to be Socrates. For the Romans, it's going to be the end of the Punic Wars. For the Roman Christians, it's going to be Attila the Hun. For the Germans, it's going to be the investiture contest, the end of the contest. For the Faustians, it's going to be Voltaire and the Marquis de Sade in the Enlightenment period. For the age of, I don't know what to call this, the age of construction. Maybe we'll call it the age of marketing. Construction. The age of marketing is with Plato. For the Greeks, Julius Caesar. For the Romans, and we could also add in populism here. For the Roman Christians, it would be the defeat of Arianism. For the Germans, it would be the rise of the Hanseatic League as the age of marketing, and for the Faustians, it would be communism and Nazism as populism. For the age of science, we have Aristotle for the Greeks, we have Constantine the Great for the Romans, we have Charles Martel for the Roman Christians, and we have Jan Hus for the Germanics, and we have 1945 dawn of the atomic age for the Faustians. I mean, we might want to date it a little bit earlier than the atomic age, but that's where we're going to put it for now. Age of technology for the Greeks would be Archimedes. That is where they're going to soon be wiped out of independence and be conquered by the Romans. For the Romans, it is the Battle of Catalaunian Plains. For the Roman Christians, it is the consolidation of Europe under Charlemagne, which ends the Roman period of the domination of the Romans and Roman culture over Christianity. Now it becomes a Germanic Christianity. And then you have Columbus for the Germanics. Columbus ends this Germanic-centered kingship. We'll say Columbus / maybe we'll throw in some Freemasons in there. Say that the Freemasons are coming. And that's the end of Germanic kingship. And that kind of overlaps with, we said, for the Faustians. And for the Faustians, we could say that we're now in the age of technology. I'm thinking about pushing the Faustians to be later and pushing... yeah, I'm thinking of saying, I don't know, Jan Hus, Black Plague, I don't know. The Black Plague as a beginning, Jan Hus as a beginning for the Faustians, Humanism, 1450, as the age of codification. Okay, all right, I'm seeing it, I'm feeling it. So it's basically like the Greeks begin, and the Romans begin about 200 years after the Greeks, and the Romans die off about 200 years after the Greeks. The Roman Christians begin about 750 years after the Romans, and the Roman Christians die off about 300 years after the Roman Christians. I don't know if that's appropriate, but that's just the way we've put it in here. And I don't think that's really the best way to do it. I think we're going to have to do some consolidation here of the quote-unquote Roman Christians. Yeah, I think before, okay, Charles Martel, I hate to say it to you, but I think Charles Martel is going to be part of the age of mythogenesis of the Germanic kings. And I think then Charlemagne is going to be part of the age of codification. Yep. And then I think following Charlemagne, we're going to have Louis the German as the age of genius. And then we're going to have the Ottonian Renaissance as the myth of progress. And then we're going to have the Kingdom of Aragon as the age of atheism, which doesn't make sense, but we're just shifting dates around. And then we're going to have the age of marketing, be the investiture contest, which is also an age of populism, so it kind of makes sense. Hanseatic League is going to be the age of science. And then the age of technology is going to be Jan Hus. And that's where it'll leave off with the Germanics. For the Faustians, we're going to put in, besides humanism, or put it in Columbus there. Okay. Jan Hus slash, what is the term there? Black Plague. So the interesting thing about the transition between the Germanic and the Faustian is that the Germanic age ends not with an external invasion. See, the Greeks are invaded by the Romans. The Romans, in a sense, are invaded by the Germans. And this whole Roman Christian thing, I think, is a little bit problematic there. I don't know what we do with the Roman Christian thing. Probably consolidate a lot of it. We had Attila the Hun, we had Arianism. We'd say that would be sometime in 1600. 1600 would be Charles Martellish. So we're going to put, yeah, I don't know. I don't know about the overlap between the Roman Christian age. Yeah, the Roman Christian age is a very it's a transition period between the Roman age and the Germanic age. It's not really a legitimate age in itself because it lasts, well, it does last 700 years, which is appropriate. The Romans, we said, the Romans lasted a lot longer than, but what if we did some stuff, though? But what if we shifted things around? The beginning of the Punic Wars, the end of the Punic Wars, Julius Caesar. Now you see what's going on. Okay, Constantine the Great. Why did I not think before? Of course, Constantine has to be in here for the Roman Christian. Now we're getting going with it. Okay, keep with me here, because we're going to try to shorten the Roman period. And we're going to try to fix this up, okay? So the Roman period ends not with the Battle of Catalonian Plains. That's not the end of... maybe we can say that's the beginning of the Germanic period. What about that? Ever think about that? That we could do that? That would be pretty cool. Charles Martel as the age of codification. Charlemagne as the age of genius. Then Louis the German as the age of progress. Then the Ottonian Renaissance is the age of atheism. Maybe we'll call it the age of atheism / secularism. And then we'll say Kingdom of Aragon is the age of / slash Crusades as the age of populism. Whoops. The age of science will be the investiture controversy. And then the age of technology will be the Hanseatic League. And that's where we'll leave it off. And then we'll say Jan Hus begins the Faustian Age. Ooh, now I'm interested. Now you got me interested. We have, okay, so for the Roman Christian, we said the Roman Christian lasts 700 years. Here's the part we had to figure out the Roman. Okay, the Roman would be Julius Caesar, and then we're going to say like 200 AD is the age of science, the age of technology is 300 AD, and that would be the end. We'll say like Julian the Apostate. We'll say Julian the Apostate is the end. So we'll say from start to finish, gosh, Rome still lasts way too long. Okay. We can still fix this, right? Founding of Rome, First Republic, Battle of Allia, beginning of Punic Wars, end of Punic Wars, Julius Caesar, ooh. Julius Caesar has to be the, he's got to be the end of Rome. We got to put him at the end there. Julius Caesar at the end of Rome. Oh yeah, now things are looking better. And now we just got to fill in the time between Punic Wars and then something that happened, we'll say Soci Wars. What are the Soci Wars? The Social War. That would be 91 BC. So we'll throw in Social War as the age of populism. How about the Gracchus brothers? Tell me about the Gracchus brothers, the Gracchi. Ooh, that's 133 BC. The Gracchus brothers definitely have to be the age of populism, though. Sorry, Wars of Soci. That'll be the Social Wars, will be the age of science. And then the age of technology will be Julius Caesar as 70 BC. So we're going to maybe have to fix some of those things, spread some of those things out. But clearly, founding of Rome, mythogenesis, age of codification, Roman Republic, age of genius, battle of the Allia, myth of progress, beginning of Punic Wars, age of secularism, end of Punic Wars, age of populism, Gracchi, the Gracchus brothers, age of science, the Social War, age of technology is Julius Caesar. And then we get into the Roman Christian age, Christ born, mythogenesis, age of codification, writing of the gospel, age of genius, Council of Carthage, myth of progress, Council of Nicaea / Constantine the Great, age of atheism, Pope Leo the Great, Attila the Hun, age of populism, the end of the Arius cult, age of science starts with Charles Martel, age of technology starts with Charlemagne. So there is a lot of overlap there that I'd like to cut down on. The Viking. Will the Vikings help me here? So when did the Vikings begin? The earliest people, Viking raids, the Vikings started maybe in 790s. So how does that fit in here? Well, that's after Charlemagne. So I don't know about that. I don't know that this works. I want to condense the Christian period a little bit more. But it is 700 years, but 700 years is sort of the number that we're working with. The Germanics begin, we say that they end in 1262, and we say, which is pretty much, we could just call it the medieval. Yeah, the Germanic is like 800 years, so it's not that bad. So we do have kind of the introduction here. Greek civilization, Roman Christian, Germanic medieval, and then Faustian. They all run between like 600, 800 years, which is pretty reasonable. That's what we were looking to do. We were just trying to come up with civilizational chronologies that would kind of match up and be in parallel to one another. So that is an aspect, that is a thing that we've done. That is definitely something that we have here. So then we'll say the Roman Christian, I don't like this, but when is Charles Martel? Charles Martel has to be the end of the Christian period. Sorry. He has to be. And then we have to come up with something in 600 AD that happens. So I don't know what we do there. But we have to figure that out. It's got to be like 688 years. And then we would say the Germanic, we said that started with the Battle of Catalonian, oops, deleted that. The battle there, so what did we come up with as a number? 816. So the Germanic age is a little bit too long here. It's a little bit too lengthy. I don't know about starting with the Battle of Catalonian Plains. I don't know if that's right. I don't know if we should be doing that. Maybe we'll put in Battle of Catalonian Plains. Then we'll put in that there, Arianism. And then maybe it's a little more reasonable. I don't know how the Battle of Catalonian Plains is populism, though. I don't know how that works out. And we just did the wrong color. Okay, how about now? How about if we ended at Charles Martel? Does that make sense? And then we begin their Germanic with Charles Martel. Now I'm all messed up, though. But now I'm all messed up. If we say Charles Martel is the origin, is the mythogenesis, can we have overlap, though? Can we just have overlap? No, because we wanted to shorten the period. Ooh, baby. Oh, sack of Rome. How could we forget that? Sack of Rome can be the mythogenesis of the Germanic peoples. Okay. Alright, I'm feeling it. I mean, even though that comes before the Battle of Catalonian Plains, whatever. We'll say the sack of Rome, right? And then we'll say, whoops, Charles Martel. And that was 410. Okay. It still doesn't exactly work. Sack of Rome. I wanna really get fall of Rome, though. Third siege, aftermath. A more severe sack of Rome. Sack of Rome, aftermath. Damaging Visigothic sack. More thorough interpretation. Pope Leo. Okay, so we'll maybe say this sack of Rome. We'll maybe say 455, but I really want to get into the Battle of Ravenna. Romans, the last Roman Empire was not recognized as a legitimate ruler. Mercenary troop. The forced ending the 1200 years of Roman rule. Romulus was sent into retirement. Abdicate by Odoracer. Okay, Odoracer was a barbarian statesman who became king of Italy. Okay, maybe we can say Odoracer. Alright, I'm feeling Odoracer. Because I just want something that's more like, more late, you know. I don't want Sack of Rome to be the big one that kicks the Romans out. I want Odoracer. So then we've got these dates now. We've got 1267 as the Hanseatic League, and we've got 496. So then we're at a more reasonable 774. That's more reasonable. It's not perfect, but it's more reasonable, at least. I think I can deal more with 774 than I can with like 800. I mean, 800 is just ridiculous. Can't handle that. Can't deal with it, yo. So we'll say that will be the... I know we want the Germanic to go a little bit later. Who follows Odoracer? Represented himself as a client of the emperor. Granted by the Emperor Zeno, is referred to as a king. Who is his successor? Who is his successor? His fall and death. Odoracer's. Theodoric. Okay. There's all kind of things. Where is God? Whoa. There's all kinds of things happening. So anyway, we'll kind of leave that where it is. We'll kind of just put that where it is and sort of leave it. We'll say this is where it is at for now. The Faustian. What's going to come next, though? What's the next turning, guys? And when did the Faustian start? So the Faustian, if we say it started with the Black Plague, we say it ended in 2001. That would make the Faustian 6 Faustian. 651. So what does that then mean for the future? How long could we continue into the future before we have to get something entirely new? Well, let's look at the Germanic, which is the longest lasting. I would say that at most, here's a prediction we're going to make. Prediction: Faustian ends in 2121. That is the date we're saying. That's when the Faustian. That's when we're going to put a limit on the Faustian, guys. So I hope that was entertaining. I think it was. I don't know how visible I was the whole time. But thanks for listening to me ramble for 2 hours. See you next time. Bye-bye.